Okay, class. This is one frustrated AP teacher. This is take 4 for me. Your first take, hopefully, but take 4 for me. All on me, some technical issues, some things that are beyond my control, but it is what it is. We may even have someone come in and interrupt, um, but it's about you guys, so actually that would be pretty important. And there's a way I prove that you could just prove to me that I could pause it. So we shouldn't have any more interruptions, and I'm going to treat this like live. I'm probably going to make some mistakes. I do when I teach regularly, and I'll just have to fumble through them and just hope none of them involve profane language, which is on the tip of my tongue right now because of all the mistakes I keep making. But let's move forward. So ladies and gentlemen, today's the day that you could potentially get overwhelmed. But I'm here to reassure you. I gave you a little warning yesterday, and we're going to go through all of it today. But today's also very exciting for me because today's the first day we're actually going to learn some history. Like actually, everything else we've been doing is sort of like getting you used to it, telling you what the class is going to be like. Starting today, we, at some point, at least talk about some history. I'll look over here to the side too because I'm running a timer. I feel it's my obligation to basically get through all the material and or teach 45 minutes. So, I'll cut myself off at that time. If I ever finish earlier, great. So that's why I'm looking over here. I don't have something more pressing going on to my right. So let's talk about the first thing, the test. You may say to yourself, you knew you were going to get a test today, an essay today, and maybe you didn't know about some of the supplements. That will de-stress you about that. But why did I email you the test? Or if you haven't opened up your Gmail account yet, you didn't know that. I emailed you your copy of the test. Okay. I did that because you have different versions. One time per quarter, you get a take-home test. And if you were to be physically in the room, I give different copies of the test. If this was a normal test in Google Classroom for AP, I would only post one version of the test, and it would be timed. So I'm going to give you plenty of warning for this, but I would say, okay, test day is going to be today at 1:15. And so the test won't even appear until 1:15. And then it has to be submitted by 2:05 is probably what I would do. It has to be submitted by then or it doesn't count. Listen, that's going to be a lot of pressure, but that's just like taking it in a regular classroom. So we'll get into that a little bit more later as we get closer to that, but that's going to be very tough because the test that I'm giving you for the take-home that you received in your email, Gmail, it is not, I didn't make it harder because it's a take-home test. That test was given to you first as a take-home because I do one take-home every quarter anyway, but I do it as the first test so that you know what you're in for. That is a very typical test. It has the same number of questions, 65. Some are multiple answer, but most are regular multiple choice. But they're all written by Bailey. I didn't write any of these questions. There are very few of these questions, some of the ones towards the end that use a narrative. But most of these are from Bailey, a bank of, like I have 300 questions to choose from every unit. And these are the sorts of questions you see on the AP exam. And they are difficult. Now, for your take-home test, I fully expect, and I'm totally fine with, you using the internet, you using your textbook. I'm not okay with you using your fellow peers, hence I gave you different versions. If I found out that you and a peer with the same version were sharing answers, I'm afraid I would go after you guys. There is one somewhat not obvious way to you, but should be, that you would be caught, but I don't even want to think like that. I know that you want to know how you will do. You want to do well, but you're going to have a depth and understanding of this anyway. And you're all good kids, so I'm going to assume the best until anybody gives me a reason otherwise. So use the resources available to you. It is not due until next Thursday at 1:15, by 1:15. And just as a preview, don't tell me about technical issues, because what I would say is, I've had them. This is my 4th take today. But I'm doing my 4th take way before this is due. So don't wait until 1 o'clock to try to turn that in. Turn it in a day early. Turn it in a couple hours early at the very least. That's the only really responsible, wise thing to do unless you want to take the chance. If it is late, it's 11% off per day late. So knowing that, you are totally welcome to use those resources. I just want you to be thinking as you go along, wow, I'm going to have a test just like this with 65 questions at this depth, at this level. How well will I have to know the material to be able to answer these questions on a regular test? And the answer is very well. I'll throw out this too. When I give you that time test, there's a few things I can do to discourage cheating there, but I mean, I've just racked my head about it. I can't stop you from using your phone, and I'm just never going to know. I'm just not. That's why I'm going to be so maniacal about the time. Because when you have a 65 question test that you must take in, I haven't decided if it's going to be 45 or 50 minutes. I have to look again at how long you get per question on the AP exam. But when you have that kind of time limit, you can't look up many questions because you just don't have much time. And if you don't have it turned in, because that's an in-class thing, it's not going to be 11% off. It's going to be that test doesn't count, and you get the next version, which I'll just be honest, it's going to be tougher. So you've got to have that submitted on time. All that's not to scare you, it's to prep you. So I suspect your test scores are going to be pretty good this time. There's also a curve, and we'll get into that a little bit later, but I do curve the test to some degree. And there's a very logical way that I do that, and it's not something I just sort of make up that day. So knowing that, your test score should be very high. I suspect your essay scores will be okay. There's a lot of good writers in this class, so they'll probably be a little better than okay. But they're not going to be perfect because you're not used to writing this caliber of writing problem. Then in the next unit, I think your essays will get even better because you'll have some feedback. And then I suspect your test scores are going to be kind of bad because you've never had to really read to that level before. That'll be okay. Then you'll rise the occasion because you're that caliber of student. Somebody vouched for you to get you in here. For a lot of you, it was me. For others, it was some other teacher said, no, probably an English or another history teacher that said, no, this kid's smart. Now, you may have to work for the first time, but somebody, maybe me, and I certainly am your fan, but somebody believed in you. Some adult who knows history said, and writing, that kid is smart and they can do it. But it doesn't mean you don't have to work. That said, let me take off some of the pressure of the reading. You have to do the reading. You have a pop quiz. It'll occur one random time this unit over the reading. But normally there's even more pressure on the reading because normally you have to read not just to keep up. You have to read and maintain an understanding so that you don't have to like kill yourself getting ready for the test, studying. So here's what I do for a take home. This is what I did in my life. You can alter as you see fit. If I had a take home test, I read everything. I did read everything one time. I never reread unless I was just looking for a specific answer. When I had to read for a test like this sort of test, this is going to be very difficult, I'd read it once. And then before that class started, in case the professor was going to give a pop quiz or call on me, I would just read through sort of the headings. And if I remembered that heading is Chesapeake Bay, oh, I remember Chesapeake Bay. And I just skip to the next heading. And then if I read a heading and I'm like, oh, I don't know what the headright system is. These are all things you have to learn. Then I'd be like, oh, I better reread the first sentence of these paragraphs. And I'd be, oh, I remember that. Then if I read some heading, I'm like, I don't know what this is. And I started reading heading, first sentences, and I didn't know what that was. And I had to reread that section. And then at the end of the unit, that's exactly how I did it. I went through and I said, okay, I'm not going to reread this many chapters for this. Let me just look through this. Oh yeah, I remember that. Oh, I don't remember that. And I reread that. That's how I would suggest reading. So if you're following sort of that strategy, you're going to be okay for this first one. It's a take-home test. You know the level of detail. If it's a really tough question, you'll just look it up. Pop quiz, 5%. It's just to keep you honest. So that's the test. Let's talk about all the other things I dropped in your lap for today's class in the Google Classroom. And hopefully this is going to work. Sometimes when you change pages on Zoom, you lose some stuff. Even if you don't, I think you'll know what I'm talking about, but hopefully it will work. Okay, so I created that fake account so that fake student account, so I could show you. And I know you can see this page, or I think I know you can see this page. This is actually not the AP page. I put this in my Take 10, which we don't even have this year. That's a whole nother story. And I did that because I'm recording this at 1:56 on Thursday, and I didn't want to post all this stuff in your actual class website yet, or classroom yet, because it would freak you out. but I wanted to be able to access it. So I put it in this fake class that Rachel actually used to be in. So out of all these documents, let me just de-stress you right here, okay? Tonight you have a reading assignment that I'll have posted, and I think it's like through page 27 in the text, and then it says read subs. Unit 1, sup page 1. Unit 1, supplemental page 2. Unit 1, supplemental page 3. That's all those are. They're just things I'd like you to read because they're going to add to this chapter. I'm not giving a quiz on the supplements. I might in the next unit. I'll give you a heads up. They are for further understanding. They're not directly referenced on the test. They're supplemental to us. I would like you to read them. You do not have to stress about them, though. Then this, it just doesn't even say, it just says document August 3rd, and then it's image. These are your study guides. You don't need a study guide in this unit because it's a take-home test. But I'm always going to give you essentially this list of words and people for every unit or every chapter we covered. So this is chapter 1 and this is chapter 2. And some people print them out every unit, or normally I would hand them out. Keep them for every unit because it helps you study for a semester exam, or it helps you study for the AP exam. I have no regulations about what you need to do with it, though. I'll leave that up to your discretion. Before you take a regular test, so for unit 2, these are a great thing to look over and say, okay, here's this list of 10 people, 15 people. Do I know them? Here's this list of some vocabulary words. Do I know them? It's not all inclusive, but it gives you a good idea. So these are just study guides. These are not assignments. Not an assignment, study guide. Not an assignment, study guide. Supplemental reading, not an assignment. I think there's an assignment to read them, to look over them. No pressure. This is the thing that's super important. I think you can see this. I certainly hope you can. This is your essay prompt for chapter 1. My phone just went, I didn't touch it long enough. Okay, we're good, 13 minutes. All right, so this is your essay prompt. And we're gonna go over this. And some of this isn't gonna make sense yet, and that's okay. Why can't I find a little arrow doohickey thingamajobber? Okay, don't know. I guess we'll do it this way. So there's the directions. This says it doesn't have to be typed. Listen, I got news for you. In the digital world, it sort of has to. You're going to create a document that you're going to attach. I'm going to ask you in our live session if you need to know how to do this. But basically, if you go to classwork, click on the assignment, you can create a document that will automatically get turned in with this. If you don't know how to do that, I've got a 4-minute video that explains it for documents of the week for 10th grade. It's the same process and format. I'll post that for you. No big deal. But again, make sure you know how to do it before we actually have this due. So don't try to post this at 1:14 on Thursday, because this is also due at the start of class Thursday. Everything's due then. Okay. By the way, if this was a normal unit, it would be due Thursday. Then we'd play a review game on Thursday. Then your test would be in class on Friday. So for the next unit, it'll work something more like that. But it's not a certain day of the week or anything like that. Okay. I told you that your test would be graded on a 9-point scale. So I then take those 9 points and I multiply them by 3 and I add 3, so it's out of 30 points. The reason I do a 9-point scale is because the AP exam, that's how they do their major writing prompts. So basically, there's 9 things I'm looking for. Now, at the beginning of each unit, I'm going to give you a rubric. I'm going to go over it verbally with you. I'm not going to tell you the exact thing I'm looking for. I'm telling you like the basic thing. So number 1A is worth 2 points. If you just skip 1A, you can only get a 7 out of 9. If you do 1A poorly, you can only get a 7 out of 9. Points are not, I can give a half point because you've sort of covered upon it. We'll move from there, but basically, like I told you in yesterday's writing preview, these are short answer questions. So when you create this document to answer these questions, and I believe, by the way, you don't have to write it in one sitting. I believe you can start to create it and then not turn it in and modify it as you go. But you're going to literally, when you create your own document, it's going to say, I don't know, who am I going to pick on? I don't know, Celia. It'll say Celia, her last name, and then 1A. And then she is going to write out a couple complete sentences for that. Then 1B and a couple complete sentences. 2A and then a complete sentence or two. There's no thesis for this. There's no paragraphs for this. It's just the answer, short answer. They do need to be in complete sentences. You will only get half credit if they're not in complete sentences, but there's no thesis. There's no big paragraphs here. Okay, so your rubric, we're looking for 9 points that you could potentially get. The first 2 points are going to be found in 1A. So it's which crop. They talk about in the first thing is actually a statement, not a question. Tobacco and sugar were both common crops. Which of those two, that's what we're talking about, would be most likely farmed by someone with limited means, somebody who's poor. So you're going to get 1 point for saying blank would be farmed by somebody who was poor. That's one whole point right there. There's a right answer. It's not either of those. There's a specific right answer. One of those is a poor man's crop, and one of those is a quote unquote rich man's crop. Now, back up this choice. So you have to say, oh, I think this is what a poor person or a person with limited means would grow with some sort of logic. And so you have to explain basically why one of those is known as a poor man's crop. You don't know it yet, but you're going to know it pretty soon, and that'll make sense then. So we're not stressing yet. And you can just go back and watch this recording, just mark what minute this is, and it'll refresh your memory. So answering those 2 parts of 1A, that's 1 point for saying, oh, this is the crop that a poor man would grow. Second sentence, this is why, and you sort of explain it. It might take 2 sentences. That's worth another point. So now we're on our third point. Describe why the crop you did not choose, so whatever you didn't say in 1A, was not feasible. In other words, tell me why the other crop is a, quote, rich man's crop. Don't just say, oh, they wouldn't grow it because it's a rich man's crop. Tell me why it's a rich man's crop. That's it. You just got through 3 points. Okay, number 2. You're looking at this just horrible woodcut of these torturous, barbaric actions. If it's not clear to you what's going on, there's a Spaniard here cutting off hands of Native Americans. And I think there might be some feet in there too. No, I think it's mostly hands. Pretty gruesome picture. Then there's a few quotes. There's one by Las Casas. There's one by scholar Sepulveda. There's one by an Englishman, Josiah Winslow. Okay, so 2A. So literally, and again, Celia's going to write out 2A. She's going to answer this question. Which quote matches the picture best? So you're going to read through those 3 quotes, and you're going to think to yourself, which one of these has sort of the spirit of that picture? That picture is cruel. It's showing very harsh treatment. So essentially, you're going to say, oh, I'm picking this quote because, like the picture, this quote has a very harsh, negative view of Native Americans. That's it. That's your 4th point. 5th point, 2B. Provide further evidence to support the idea or theme of this picture. So this is where you're going to take something from your knowledge of the unit, my lectures, you're reading in the textbook, to provide a specific evidence from that theme in that picture. So in other words, you have to give me, you can't say, oh, sometimes the Spaniards cut off hands. I know, we saw that in the political cartoon. Give us another specific example of some sort of cruelty. That supports the theme of the picture. So I told you if we had a fake essay, Mr. Penrose is the meanest teacher ever. And you use the example, oh, I saw Elizabeth when she sat in the front row, stomped on her foot. That's a specific example to back up, oh, Mr. Penrose is cruel. The Spanish are even, at least colonial Spaniards are way meaner than I have ever been. So you have to come up with one of these specific examples from this unit. Okay, 6th point, give a government action or policy from this unit that represents this theme and why. For certain things, certain government policies that the Spanish issue, and you're going to have to know the name of that. You're not just going to say, oh, they have this thing. You'll say the name of that thing and what that thing did, and that'll be worth a point. Again, does that make sense now? No. Should it in 2 or 3 days, or 2 or 3 school days? Yeah, 3. Okay, so we've gone through 6 points. We got 3 points left because this is 3A, B, and C. Eventually, the treatment between Native Americans and the Spanish, between the English and the Spanish of Native Americans seemed to change. We've got a quote from a Spanish clergyman, Las Casas. We've got a map of pre-1634 colonial, quote unquote, New England, okay? And so you see like these large Native American tribes in the area they have, and then the smaller English colonies. Then you have the boundaries after 1700, where you have the Pequot Nation is basically in that little dot in Connecticut. Okay. So going back to that quote from that Spanish clergyman, Las Casas, give evidence that the views of Las Casas eventually won out in Spanish settlements. You're going to learn something in your text that says, Las Casas, who you'll see is a little bit, is a kinder vision and view of Native Americans. There's something that you can use as evidence that eventually that view won out. But you have to have that specific thing. Eighth point, I think we're on our eighth point, provide evidence from the era that the English treatment of natives was well reflected in these maps. There's a specific event that occurs that starts a trend. You can look at that first map and you can see that Native Americans had a large tract of land, large swaths of land. Most of the New World was theirs because it wasn't new to them. By the end of English colonization and Spanish colonization, their area is just insanely smaller. And so you're going to cite sort of the first time that happens. And then your ninth and final point, what seems to be the fundamental difference between the English and Spanish interaction with natives in the long run? Again, that's more from your lecture and your reading, but it ties to those. This is a very common format on the AP exam. You will have short answer questions like this on the AP exam. So we're going to practice it. It's the easier form in the scheme of things. So that's what we're going to start off with. Next unit, we'll do a traditional essay. So you've been hit with everything. You got your test. That's due Thursday by 1:15. You want to turn it in before that. You got your essay. That's due Thursday by 1:15. You want to turn it in before that. You have some readings to do. Not stressing about that. And you have a study guide that is optional and not terribly relevant for a take-home test. That's what everything is. I'm not doing any more to you. I'm just teaching you from this point on until Thursday when I collect everything, and then I'll hit you with all the new stuff. And then the next unit takes a little bit longer, and we'll basically go in roughly 8 school day cycles like that. So about a week and a half of school. That's it. That's what we do. So now I'm actually going to start teaching you about the stuff, and we're 23 minutes through. That's going to be okay, 10 or 15 minutes to actually teach a little history. And then moving forward, all I'm going to do is just keep adding to your knowledge of this information, of this stuff, to help you with your essays and your tests. No new stuff, no new assignments. There'll be reading every night to keep up. There's not going to be some like, oh, I decided to write an extra essay. Professors do that to you in college, and this is supposed to be a college class. I did not like that. My good professors, I had a pattern. We knew what we were doing when. So this is my version of the textbook. It is absolutely falling apart. I would be charged all the money if I was a student with this textbook. And I have to use this because it's where I have all my little stories and all my little highlighting, and you probably can't even see it. This is so big for me. We're finally to the actual history. And then I'll be asking you some questions about this stuff in the live sessions. And I'll keep looking at my little timer here. It's on page 4 of the old textbook for me, and you don't have to follow along in the exact pages. For you guys, it would be page 1. We're going to just go through some of these headings. And I'm going to skip a lot of them because you're AP. I mean, we don't need to go over every single thing. That's how college works. We're going to go over the stuff that's a little bit more in-depth. So first off, concept for Unit 1. They're going to talk about a lot of Native American culture in this first part of Unit 1. And there's a theme. And that theme is that in North America, you're very scattered. In South America, you have dense populations. There's something like 72 million, it's somewhere in the book, I think in today's lecture. I think there's 72 million people we kind of guesstimate. There are professors who, this is their job, guesstimating populations based on a billion different factors for certain time periods. They weren't taking a census back then, but there's roughly 72 million people in the Americas then. There's some estimates that have like 65 million of those people being in South and Central America. So North America is much more scattered. South and Central America, much more urban's not the right word, but they did have, like the Aztecs in particular, like cities. So That's a big overall theme. Going over some of the headings, they start off with like planetary perspectives and plate tectonics. Who cares? Shaping of North America, again, physically, who cares? First discoverers of America. This is where I love Bailey. This is where I would say he sounds a little dated. He talks about how the first discoverers of America start to arrive. Listen, when 72 million people are already someplace, nobody's discovering it. What it should say is first European acknowledgement of, or something like that. There were lots of people here. Don't even get me fired up about Columbus. I'm saving that for Monday. Boy, do I not like Columbus. Boy, was he not first. He's not even the first European. You get me fired up. We'll wait. Okay. So, how do people originally get here? Most people accept that land bridge idea. So really, you've got some, this is centuries and centuries and centuries and centuries ago. And then Bailey says this sort of thing like, and then water levels rose, and then 10,000 years ago, this part of humanity gets stranded. Okay. Then mass peopling occurs. Bailey loves the word peopling. I didn't even think it was a real word until I read Bailey the first time. You're going to find out that the English are terribly successful at colonization because the English are really good at peopling, which means having a lot of kids. But peopling sounds classier. So in 1492, this is really kind of where American history starts from the European United States perspective. When Columbus is going to arrive, which is going to be Monday's lecture, what's he walking into? So this is your preview of what's going on here. About 72 million people, about 2,000 different languages. And by some estimates, that many different religions as well. So we're not talking about a monolithic culture, but neither is Europe. You've got a lot of different nations in Europe, even at that time. There's even more nations in Central, South, and North America. Now, do they have some common tendencies? Yes. Native Americans of that era, I think to some degree today, tended to have religions that were more nature-centered, earth-centered. Now, people always want to bring up the extremes. Was there human sacrifice? That sort of thing. There were some extremes. I got news for you. Even in the modern world, there are some pretty extreme religions. 99% of people are, if they're involved in religion, they're involved in religions that are very typical, very standard in beliefs and practices. But what do people focus on? The 1% that are in this very unique thing. So that's why, I kind of laugh at the attention that sometimes is drawn to some Native American. Most of them paid reverence to natural cycles and the sun and the earth and things like that, and really nothing that would be that crazy to you. Now, did the Aztecs kill some people? Oh yeah. But the Aztecs, particularly this upper tier of Aztecs, they're a unique bunch. Yeah. Yes, it's true that there was one that Aztecs sometimes believe that through different phases of their history that consuming a human heart allowed you to have the life force or life spirit of the person that you consumed. And yes, we have some records that suggest there was the crowning of one particular king where he sacrificed 5,000 people and tried to eat their hearts, which I have to imagine, that's like one bite of a lot of different people. And they had a technique so where you could pull out the heart and it's still beating, and crazy. But that's a fringe group. That is not the normal thing going on. They're just, in the last 20 years, they're continuing to try to discover about this information about this game called Pocketalk. I'm fascinated by this. This is a game where we kind of don't know the rules. We just have some drawings. Historians are trying to put it together. It looked like they had this 80-pound stone ball, and they had two really low, what I would describe as like stone ring kind of basketball hoops, but really low, like I could dunk on it, but not with an 80-pound ball. And they had two teams that looked like they're pretty big teams, and you played to one. You had to take that stone ball and put it through that stone hoop. and it weighing 80 pounds and everybody on, one team, and nobody's going to let you just do it. And they apparently would play for days. So it's some sort of weird combination of soccer, basketball, whatever. And then when it looks like when the game was over, we know people got sacrificed. We don't know if the losers got sacrificed or if the winners won the right to be sacrificed. But we know that somebody was dying at the end of that game. So that's what people focus on, the extreme stuff. Most of it's more standard reverence to the sun and the moon and the earth, etc. So let's talk about some things that are not as well understood. Farming. I know you're so excited, but oh boy, you're going to get stuck with me drawing something. Let me show you a smartboard page here real quick. Now, boy, am I a bad artist. And I'm even worse when I'm not actually drawing right now with a regular marker. I have to use the mouse pad. It's not even come on, this is worse than usual. But I'm going to show you, oh boy. Listen, people, I can hear you silently judging me. Let's say you had 300 acres. No, that'll be confusing. Let's just say 100 acres of farmland here. Most farmers in Europe at this time would divide it up into, say, corn, wheat. You know what? Do they even have corn? We'll just say 3 different crops. We're just going to make up 3 crops here. So we've got 3 different crops. And what they would do is they would grow food in 2 of these fields and leave 1 what they call fallow. And then the next year, so you didn't crop out the land, so you didn't basically use up all the nutrients, this would grow here, this would grow here, and then this one would be fallow. So at any one given time, you are using, yes, I know that looks awful, roughly 67% of the land, okay? How about this for Native American farmers? Take the same stretch of land, again, before you judge me too harshly. Yes, I know I can't draw. Also, though, drawing on a mouse pad on a laptop, not ideal. What Native Americans would do is this thing called 3-sister farming, where they knew that certain crops use different nutrients in the soil. So, and then the other crop would return certain nutrients to the soil. So you could grow 3 things at the same time. 3-sister farming: beans, corn, squash, all at the same time. If you can do that, what kind of yield are you getting from your land? Some of you are going to say 100%. I would tell you, even though some people say that's impossible, it's sort of 300%, because essentially you're using each field for 3 crops simultaneously. Does that make sense? So what I would say to you is, I think there's this perception that Europeans are so advanced and that's why they were able to just sort of plow through. Oh, there's a pun for farming. I would say that's misunderstood at best. They're more advanced in some things, like having immunity to certain germs, not more advanced in other things, particularly farming. Now, this is the most important part. This is going to lead us to our lecture tomorrow. Hopefully you can see this page. You know what? I'm going to stop sharing and come back to that page just to make sure. So Native Americans, with their own unique religion and their own unique languages, and by the way, their own unique, I didn't even mention this, their own unique nations. You know the names of these nations. You've heard them before. You're just so ingrained to hearing them, you didn't even realize they were Native American nations. You know the Native American nations that were predominant in Ohio, in our region in general. Everything in our area, I'm exaggerating, a little hyperbole, most everything in our area is either named after someplace in New England, because Ohio was founded by people migrating from New England, or Native Americans. So what Native American tribes were prevalent in this area? Start naming counties. Huron, the Huron were very strong in this area, the Erie, the Sandusky. Those were Native American tribes that dominated this region. I mean, the Huron, forget about it. We'll get into them a little bit later, but they and the Mohawk were some aggressive Native American, very successful at war tribes. Other things like I live in Norwalk. Norwalk is just named after Norwalk, Connecticut, which is just named after someplace in England. This is what Ohio is made up of: Native American names, or at the very least, Native American names for things. If you go through the 88 counties in Ohio, it's over 50%, I believe, are named after some Native American tribe. So these tribes are on their own. They're doing their own thing, particularly in North America. They're completely just unknown to the rest of the world. The New World is unknown to the rest of the world. When Columbus discovers it, stop. Before we even get to Columbus, why would anybody even want to sail potentially off the edge of the world, which is also a misnomer, we'll get to that later, and discover these 72 million people who have their own little world going on? Well, this is a weird motivation, but it's really because of the Crusades. So why the Crusades? All right, let's see if we can get this here. Okay. So this is a more modern world map. But you know, the Crusades, we are seeing, there are several Crusades throughout the Middle Ages. You're seeing a lot of fighting all throughout Europe and to some degree throughout this known part of the world. And what ends up happening is you have a cultural exchange. And there are some things, particularly from India and China, that end up, because of people traveling so far, being introduced to French courts, British courts, Spanish courts, things like silk, for example. That's just one example. And people are willing to pay high dollar for this stuff because it's so rare. And they're going to have to pay high dollar because what happens is, let's say you're producing silk here, okay? And, or for our example, because this is what's handy, I have a little red beanbag. Let's just say, who is in this class? Who's my new kid? Tenon. Tenon is a rich guy. I mean, this cat is loaded. And he lives all the way in Spain. And he wants himself some red beanbags. He is rich and he wants to show off how rich he is, so he wants some red beanbags. For him to get this red beanbag, he's going to have to pay so many middlemen, because some trader from this region is going to get it to maybe here, and then maybe here, and then maybe here, and then maybe here, and then here, and then here, and then here. And you're like, why are you just making dots all over a map? Maybe it gets on a boat, sure, goes here. Because every time there's an exchange, somebody's going to make their money. So let's say it costs me in China $1 to make this red beanbag. If I'm going to travel halfway across China to the second point, I'm selling it to the next guy for $3. And then that guy who paid $3 is going to sell it to this person for, I don't know, I'm just going to start making up numbers, $10. And that person is going to sell it to this person for $20, and then maybe $50, and then $100. And by the time it gets all the way to 10, boy, I hope I'm saying your name right, this thing's worth $2 grand, $3 grand. And man, I mean, he'll do it. He'll pay. I mean, he's loaded. But you know, the idea that this $1 item is worth $3 grand because it has to go through so many middlemen inspires people, particularly the Portuguese. It inspires the Portuguese to say, we've got an idea. What if, crazy as it is, because if you're in Portugal, you got no chunk of this trade. What if we could just take a little shortcut and we could just go around Africa? Is that possible? And then just boom, go straight here and buy this item right from China, right from India, whatever it is. If you could buy, let's say you got this beanbag for $10, you're still paying some markup because it only costs $1 to make. You buy it for $10, but now you are the only middleman or woman to bring it all the way back to Spain. And before it was selling for $3 grand. Let's say you say, you know what, I'm running the bargain basement price of just $1,500 for this. Ladies and gentlemen, think about the cash that you are making. You are buying something for $10 and you're selling it for $1,500, which by the way is half of what it cost the old way. And you're still making infinitely more profit than anybody else can make. That's what is going to inspire this revolution in nautical technology and trade. And so what you have, a series of explorers listed here in your textbook, Diaz, da Gama, we'll get into Ferdinand and Isabella funding later, but these explorers who are going to be the first around the southern tip of Africa, the first to do this, the first to do that, and they end up establishing this route, and along this route, the Portuguese are like, oh my gosh, we are killing it with all this money. We're going to build a fort here. We're going to build a fort here. forts are not. They actually are. And we're going to build all these forts along the coast, and we're going to fortify this so that nobody else gets in on this. And they're going to do such a good job fortifying it, that other people who want to get here are going to be tempted to go, man, I wonder if there's another way. Man, the Portuguese were really clever. How else could we get there? Oh, I know. Maybe we'll go this way because they don't know this exists. And they think they'll just, boom, get there the shortcut way without having to deal with all of these forts that the Portuguese have created. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the impetus. That's the motive for all of this innovation. The caravel, the first ship with type of ship. It's a type, not a ship, with multiple masts. The first with a steering rudder in the back, which, mind blown. Where else would it be? It is the first type with triangular sails, because instead of having just these square sails, triangular sails are better for tacking. If you've ever, I don't know if anybody's ever been sailing, you can kind of sail upwind, kind of like zigzagging, and it makes all this possible. That caravel then just makes it so mankind has a much greater span, a much greater reach. And then people are like, oh, we can get further than ever before, which is going to bring us to this person, Columbus, that we will talk about on Monday. We went through a lot. I hope it wasn't overwhelming. Remember to look through the instructions above this post, and you're going to have your reading for Monday. You're not going to stress about the reading because it's a take-home test. You're going to want to jump on things this weekend because we're moving fast. Everything's going to be due Thursday. So the supplements, you just breeze through those. I wanted you to get used to that idea. You've got supplements you need to read for an essay in the next unit. Don't stress about it. I need you to read through page 27 in your text tonight. We're a little behind of what I had you read, but we're going to be catching up fast Monday and Tuesday. I'll probably take it a little easy on you. I think we're going to probably finish early on Wednesday, and then I won't have as long of a lecture and set you free to work on all the stuff that'll be due. This is pretty typical. So hope this made sense. You can reach out to me with any questions, any concerns. Plus, we'll have our live session. If you happen to watch this before our live session, you can ask them then. Otherwise, reach out to me. I'll get a hold of you, and we'll set up a Zoom with you and your parents, or a phone call, or whatever works for you. Okay? Everybody have a great weekend and get started on your work.